Alamitos High School. And then he is also chef and owner of Skimmer's Panini Grill in Mission Viejo. And we did add the website to his restaurant. It's in the Staff Council Staff Appreciation Week webpage for anybody that wants to check out his restaurant. So, and then just wanted to also mention that we do want to invite everybody which are located in the Staff Appreciation website. Okay, and without further ado, I would go ahead and introduce Chef Scott so he can take it away. Chef Scott, I believe we can't hear you. Might want to test your mic.
Now?
Yes, perfect.
Okay. Oh, I don't know, that was weird. I was unmuted. Okay, sorry, start over. So we're gonna make fresh egg pasta. 3 ingredients only, a little salt, kosher salt. I'm using all flour and just a combination of eggs and egg yolks. Okay, so you may have seen like on TV or some of those chef videos, they make like the volcano with the flour, work on the table, kind of cool to bring it all together. You know, that is certainly an Italian method. And I think that it evolved that where we just sort of use the flour to make the bowl, because I think Italian didn't have a lot of stainless steel bowls hanging around in the old days. So that method is very popular. I just do the same thing, but I do it in a bowl. It keeps it from spreading, keeps the board clean, and contains everything. Okay, so we're just going to scoop, and we're using volume measurements. Of course, if this was our pasta restaurant, we might be measuring by weight to make sure we have a lot of consistency. Although there is this sort of need to be a little flexible, right? So if we just say, oh, I scoop 2 cups of flour and it's too much flour or it's too dry, well, we have to make an adjustment. Okay, so being open and flexible is useful when we're cooking beyond the recipe. Okay, so I'm going to just scoop and sort of level. I just sifted this a little bit. This flour, I'm in my high school classroom, so like there's humidity at night, it's cold, warms up, and then of course a paper sack holding the flour is not keeping the moisture out. So you can sift if you need to. A lot of times we'll sift before we measure, especially when we're using volume measuring tools. And of course, if I scoop very vigorously, or if like the flour bucket got banged around and it's settled, there's more particles in every cup if I scoop vigorously, or if it's cold outside, there's more moisture in the air. So we have to be a little flexible. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to scoop 2 cups by volume, and then I'm just not going to just dump it all in. I'll put in almost the whole cup, and we'll just keep a little bit back. So if it's it's okay, we can add flour. If the dough is really dry, it's very good to add more eggs. Okay, so always err on the side of keeping it more on the moist side, whatever it is we're making. Biscuit dough yesterday, right? Keeping it a little bit moist is better than the opposite. Okay, so it's always easier to dry things out with adding more flour versus trying to add more moisture. More moisture is a real, not fun to do that. All right, so I'm going to keep this flour nearby for the board. I'm going to work right here on the metal table, and we're going to put a teaspoon of kosher salt. You can see in my salt box, like the kosher salt is large grains and there's no additives. And so I think you get a really nice, clean flavor of salt, like nice, clean, pure flavor. Salt shaker salt has iodine, anti-caking ingredients. I don't know. It just is, I think aside from it having a taste beyond sort of just that clean salt flavor from kosher, I think this is easier. Kosher, because of the larger grains, is easier to when we're cooking. Okay, salt shaker, you know, grains are so small, you can end up getting a a very salty bite. So just a habit, probably, I don't know how long now, years, over a decade, easily 2 decades I've been using kosher salt. So I just like the flavor and I'm used to working with it. If you do switch or you only have kosher or your recipe's in kosher, the ratio of kosher to table salt is, if you have a teaspoon of table salt, you need to double the measurement to get the same amount of kosher. Does that make sense? So kosher is less salty because the grains are bigger. It's not less salty, but the grains are bigger, so less grains fit in the measuring tool than with table salt. Okay, so 2x it for kosher, or if you have a kosher measurement, then you're going to half it, right, to go to table salt. Because we'll get the salt in there. And then just quickly a little bit about the salt as I'm cracking my eggs. Kosher salt does not, I mean, it is kosher following Jewish dietary restrictions. But it's called that because in the old days, in preparing meat to become kosher, they would use the grain crystal salt. And so it's known as koshering salt, and it just evolved into the name kosher salt. Okay, but give it a try. There's so many salts on the market now. There's lots to give a try, lots of different things to try. Okay, so we're gonna have 2 cups of flour. We're gonna put 4 yolks and 2 whole eggs. Okay, and I'm gonna crack them all into this measuring cup first, and then we can, if there's any shell fragments, sometimes, I haven't seen it in a while, but sometimes there's a little blood spot on the yolk, right? We can remove those things. If I were to crack it, which of course, I'm sure no Italian grandma's gonna pre-crack them somewhere, or grandpa, right? But if you crack in there and shells go in there, and it's like we're gonna look for a white shell and white flour, it's just a better practice. And I'm gonna give it a quick pre-scramble, kind of pre-measured pre-mixed before I go into the flour. Okay, so just a few little habits you can adopt, which I think that will improve your cooking. Okay, so we're gonna go 2 whole eggs. Try not to crack on the edge of things. I tried the Alton Brown tip is to crack on a flat surface. Doesn't always work out that way, but you tend to not get as many shell fragments. So, or if I crack it here, right, for sure, if there's going to be a shell fragment, it's going in there. Whereas if I crack on the side, then maybe it's not going to fall in there. Okay, so you can, that wasn't very nice. All right, so now, and we're not going to save the whites today, but you could certainly save the egg whites, egg white omelet, meringue. I just don't really have any outlet here at the high school. So I do it with my hand. I'm just going to crack the yolk or the egg into my hand. I'm going to let the egg whites fall through my parted fingertips and then put my yolk in there. Okay, so we need 4 yolks. I'm just going to kind of squeeze that egg white off of the yolk so that I can put it into my measuring cup. 2, 3, and 4. Now, if we are going to use the white, especially for meringue, we want to be careful not to let any fat. In this case, the yolk. You don't want to get any yolk in there because that will inhibit the ability of the egg whites to whip up. So pastry chefs know about that. And of course, if you're like, hey, you want these egg whites, and they can see any tiny bit of yellow yolk, they're like, no, we don't want those. Those are no good. So we want to keep it clean if we can. All right, so salt, the flour, and my 4 yolks and 2 whole eggs. And I'm just giving it a quick scramble. Break the yolks. Jacques Pepin usually pokes the yolks first. And then we're going to add it. So you can make a little well if you want. And it just kind of contains the liquid. Now I did go to cooking school in Italy, and while there, I collected all the different chefs' pasta recipes, and the variation of the number of yolks, whole eggs, yolks, total number in a kilo of flour was pretty dramatic. The guy from Emilia-Romagna is the center of the country, where considered the breadbasket of Italy, where basically egg pasta is made famous. He was putting 15 yolks in his recipe, where you think, how could that possibly go in there? And it does. And it makes the most beautiful golden yellow pasta dough you've ever seen. And then there was guys, it's just like, oh, okay, 3 and I don't know, a quarter cup of water. Everybody had a different recipe. So I think that shows you that, you can be flexible with this. And of course, it's just like data, right? Garbage in, garbage out. If you, buy, I don't know, flour at 7-Eleven, it's probably been sitting there for a while. It's not going to be as nice as if you buy, fresher flour.
Chef Scott.
Hold on.
Time to get into the class.
Oh, thanks. Okay, I got him. He's in. All right, so I'm just scrambling the eggs, and I'm just pulling from below at the base of the crater. I'm just pulling in the flour. And what I want to do with this technique is I'm just trying to get it so that if I turn it onto the table, the eggs aren't going to run all over the place. Okay, so that's the only goal that we have at this point. You could work right on the table if you want. It's a little more messy, and I don't care for that. So, and of course I sanitized, everything was off this table, got sanitized last night, got sanitized again in the morning. So we want to make sure that we're working on a clean surface. And then we're going to mix by hand. We're going to knead the dough together by hand. And then we'll work on the pasta machine, which I have set up here next door or next table. And then we'll go over there. And then hopefully I've been able to do it in an hour. I'm going to make this, I'm going to roll it out, I'm going to cut it, and then we're going to cook some, and I'm going to show you how to apply, I guess I call it that. I guess no, Italians don't say it's the Italian cooking method. That's how they make pasta. But here, and probably my experience growing up, like my mom would be like, hey, we're having spaghetti. And then we boil the noodles, pour the noodles into the colander, rinse the noodles, and the noodles would be kind of ready to go and cold. And then put some of those, room temperature noodles onto your plate, ladle the sauce over, stir it together, canister of green Parmesan shaker cheese. And that was spaghetti in my house when I was growing up. The Italians are careful not to put too much into the dish, right? The idea is for the pasta to be the star, the pasta itself. The flour that's raised in my field next to my town, the eggs that are from my chickens. So those flavors are what are trying to be highlighted in an Italian pasta dish. And the rest of the things, the flavors, and it's funny because in Italian and translated, it's the word condiment. So it's condimenti in Italian, and it's not a ton of ingredients that are supported, by the pasta. It is the pasta that is just supported very sparingly and subtly by those flavoring ingredients. Okay, so we're gonna probably be a little bit in the middle. I'm gonna show you a pasta we're gonna make with a little bit of spicy pork sausage and some red Swiss chard. And basically we're gonna make the condiment, prepare the condiment in the pan. And then in the case of egg pasta, it's really quick to cook, a couple minutes. So once the condiment is there, ready, waiting for the pasta, then we'll drop the pasta in the water and I'll show you how to bring it together. The real key, I guess what makes it really the Italian method, at least compared to my mom's method, is that the pasta and the condiment is going to get cooked together. Okay, so we're going to add pasta water, and which has some salt, which we salted, and then it has the flavor of that egg pasta being cooked in it. And we're going to use the pasta water to help create that sauce. So it's a very simple technique, and it can be applied. It's irrelevant what the condiment is, and it's really, I think, irrelevant the shape of the pasta. It works with dry pasta. So let me get to those things. All right. So we're going to knead the pasta here on the table, and doesn't look like we might need to add a tiny bit of flour, but remember I have my reserved flour from earlier when I measured it. Okay, so we're going to kind of try to stick to the measurement, but I'm not going to be married to it. If it's not enough, I'll put some more. Okay, so I'm just pressing. What I'm trying to do is, as that inside of the dough is very moist and sticky, I want to expose that sticky dough to the rest of these dry ingredients. Okay, so we just want to bring it together Okay, sometimes like students will want to squish it with their hand like this. And we don't want to pull the dough apart. We want to push the dough together. Okay, so if you just sort of think of that as you're doing it. If your family isn't sitting at the table with their fork and knife in their hand, you can actually find this, I find this to be a little meditative. You know, it's nice to relax and just work with the dough. Okay, and anytime I feel like it's sticky, then I'm going to move that to wherever there's some dry ingredient. I can cover that up. This looks like it's going to be just close enough. Okay, and then it's a little sticky. I don't really have much left on the table, so I can put a little bit of flour here. And again, I'm just adding a little at a time. We don't want to add too much at once. And for kneading this, all I'm doing is I'm going to push with the heel. I'm going to push with the heel of my hand. Okay, push it away. This hand is just going to rotate the dough and fold it over. And I'm going to push it away. Okay, and I'll know on the heel of my hand if it's not enough flour because it's sticking to me. Okay, so I know I'm going to add a little bit more flour, a little at a time. Okay, and if if it's really sticky, then you can add a little bit more at a time. Okay, and all I'm doing is just pushing it, rolling the dough, rotate slightly. Okay, and I'm using my shoulder. I'm not using my wrist, using my elbow. Okay, so that really helps with the fatigue part. You don't want to get too tired. We still have more work to do to cook the pasta. Okay, and as I'm rolling it, I'm feeling that moisture content against the heel of my hand. So if it's going to be too sticky, which it still is, you can add a little more flour at a time. But again, if you're having a little, transcendental meditation session, then, add the flour very slowly and really work the dough. And as the dough comes together, it's going to turn quite silky and smooth. It'll have a slight tackiness and in a good way, a little tackiness in a good way, and feel sort of moist. Now, we also can use the pasta machine to help us knead the dough. So when I get this to the right consistency where it's not sticky, I still can further mix the dough on the pasta machine, which is very useful. I'll show you that in a second. Okay.
So here, Chef Scott, we're just pretty much just keep rolling the dough until you don't feel any moisture. It's not sticking to the palm of your hand.
Yes, but this is not ready. So you can see there's a little dry flour on the outside. I'm going to knead it until I get a really beautiful yellow, smooth, slightly tacky surface. Okay. So I only want to add flour when I need it. If it's when I feel the need to put more in, right? So I'm a little sticky there, but it's not really sticky as much as it was a minute ago. I was going to make the magic of television dough batch earlier, and I thought, no, I can get it done. That might have been a mistake. We'll see. We're almost there. So we just want to really make sure that we get the right moisture content at this point. I'm just keeping a little flour, a little bench flour here. I can just swipe a little in as I need it. As I need it, and as I need it. Both needs used in the same sentence. Okay, and so when you think, oh, that's good, it's dry, and you keep working with it, it's going to get a little sticky, which it is right now, but you can see how it's really smoothing out. Okay, and we're not going to work with this much dough at one time. You can cut this into thirds or even into fourths, and we're going to work with that amount of dough on the machine. Okay, all right, now we're good. So if your hand's tired, you can alternate. And as we manipulate the dough like we're doing, and once we put the egg in there and the dough is hydrated, then what you will infer from that is by putting some kind of moisture in contact with the flour, you've activated the protein. Okay, so in dry flour, there is no gluten. There's only the potential for gluten, which is two different proteins, one called gliadin and one called glutenin. And until the dough is moisturized, you're not gonna you're not going to have any gluten present. And once we add any kind of moisture, then you let those proteins start link up. And as they link up, then those two proteins form gluten, and then the gluten strands link together and create this gluten matrix, and that's what's going to make our pasta be able to be stretched very thin and still stay together. Or you think of pizza dough or chewy bread, whatever the case may be. Okay, 1 second.
And we just had a quick question. Does the dough turn more yellow when kneading it?
It doesn't, yeah, it'll, as it absorbs the flour, it's going to become more yellow. It's going to show the color of those egg yolks. Okay, let me just dismiss my class. All right, high school people. Get that late work into me, and we'll see you tomorrow for the sugar cookie, or sorry, see you Friday for caramel cookie demo. Okay. All right, that's it. See you on Friday. Okay, so we're just gonna finish putting this flour in. I'm very close to where I want to be. And what we can do, and then if when we're working with it, the dough starts to really get firm and you can't eat it, then you just let it rest, cover it, and let it just sit on the counter. Even just a couple minutes is going to make a big difference. Okay, so I'm just going to separate this a little bit so that I can work with the smaller quantity and I can get over to the machine. Okay, so.
Just very quickly, Chef Scott, we do have another question. Can we use a stand mixer for the kneading?
Yes, you can use the mixer. It works great if you have a KitchenAid. If you have a KitchenAid, it works great. Yeah, you can make the whole thing in there. Even like the biscuits yesterday, you can make those in. I could, if I use the food processor, you can make biscuits in like 2 minutes. You can be in the oven in like 3 minutes. But there's something to be said, I think, for the fact that you did make it by hand. Okay. Yeah, you definitely can use the dough hook and have it kneaded in the machine. All right, so I'm not feeling the stickiness really. So I'm going to go to the machine. I'm going to go over the machine. Ideally, I would need this a little bit longer, but that's okay. Water. All right, so we're going to move over here a little. Okay, so now here's my pasta machine. I'm going to just pass the dough through the largest setting. So with this adjustment, we can move these rollers closer and closer together. This is the widest setting, just as a hand breadth. Okay, so you'll see as I put it through, this dough is going to be a little sticky, right? But that's okay because the machine's going to help us knead it. I'm going to just cut this down a tiny bit. And I just have the pieces of dough we're not using. I have them under a bowl, so keep it from drying out. Okay, so you can just pass it through. This again, this is the largest setting. Okay, now it didn't stick in there. It has a little bit of moisture, but I'm just kind of folded and I'm trying to get it into this shape, right? Sort of a small squarish rectangle that is the width of the machine. Okay, so I get the most noodles out of each pass. And I'm just folding it when it comes out. I'll show you here on the next pass, so it's a little sticky. Square. This is again, I'm not making it smaller, I'm not clicking it down, it's all the same size. And now you can see as it's starting to go through there, it's not bumpy, it's getting really nice and smooth. Okay, so I'm almost there.
And just very quickly, somebody did ask, if time permitted, would you need to rest the dough?
So you only need to, well, I would say you only need to rest the dough if you're having trouble manipulating. So if you develop the gluten and it's really strong, it can be very difficult to knead the dough. So I would rest it then. I know there are a lot of directions will say, you know, it's good to rest the dough. And what happens is during that time is you'll get, you can let the dough hydrate. right? So that for sure, all of the flour that's in there has been hydrated, and then you are going to get the best texture you can. But I found that this step here, putting it through the machine, right, to finish a little bit of the kneading is useful and can be very, very helpful. And really, once I get that nice smooth texture in the machine, then I'm ready to roll down the size and make the noodle thinner and thinner. So you can see how it's really smoothing out now. Okay, so I'm going to just fold it once more. I'm going to put it through here. And then I'm going to start flicking down and making the rollers closer together. Okay, this is an old machine. They don't look great. This one's actually made in Italy. So once I start bringing the rollers closer together, I'm not going to fold this again. Okay, I only fold it, which is part of the extra kneading process. I only do that at the very largest setting. Once I'm starting to thin the dough, then no more folding. I usually go to the second to the last setting. Okay. You can have any thickness you want, right? If you like the noodles to be really thick, then stop rolling, right? Or if you like them thin, then keep rolling. And there is even there's a cutting attachment that goes on here too, but I'll show you a quick method to cut by hand. All right, so now we're getting pretty thin. As you can see, I don't know if you can see through this little translucence, you can see the light through it. These are, for me, this is a little slightly thick. I think we can go one more thinner. And then by cutting it by hand, we're going to get to decide how long we want the noodles and how wide we want the noodles. So.
And we did have another question come in, Chef Scott. If we don't have a dough machine, is there an alternative method to doing this?
Yes. So if you don't have the pasta machine, you can do it by hand. Okay. Which I don't know. I don't know how therapeutic that is. That's a little frustrating. It's hard to get it this thin by hand, although it can be done. So if I was rolling by hand, I would just keep thinning the dough a little more each time. If I wanted to use a rolling pin. Okay, so say we set it here, start rolling. Longer, you can let the edge of the dough hang over and keep rolling and thinner and thinner and thinner.
So we might want to look into investing into a
Yeah, I
dough
would say,
machine.
yeah, and they're pretty inexpensive these days. You can get for somebody that'll do the job. Maybe not making pasta every night, but certainly hope you do the job. So I've got it very thin. You can see how translucent that is. I'm just gonna get flour on there so it doesn't stick. And when we cut the dough, we want to make sure that we have plenty of flour. Okay. I think you can never have enough flour when it comes time to cut it. Okay, so we're going to just make the dough, make the noodles we're going to use for the pasta we're going to make. So what we're going to do at this point is, if I roll this up and cut it, the noodles are going to be this long. Okay, so that's not too practical, although it could be kind of fun to eat. So I think maybe like this, if I have a long piece, I usually just cut it in half and then figure that's going to be the length of my noodles. Okay, so that's okay. We'll make them this long. And so a quick way to cut is called the scroll method. Oh, I learned this from a chef in Italy named Massimo Bomprezzi. And you just roll up the dough from one side. Again, you have plenty of flour. Roll up the dough from the other side. Doesn't have to be right to the middle. And we're not rolling it super tight. It can be nice and loose. So you can see, like from the side view, like scroll. He didn't call it that. I named it. So then once we have the scroll rolled, then we're going to cut. And now we know the noodles are going to be this long, right? And then we're going to decide how wide. So if you want tagliatelle, it's probably right about here. If you want fettuccine or you want pappardelle, those are wider. Okay, so you just can pick. I would just say make them the same, right? So that they cook evenly. just take a knife and just cut the noodles, okay? Then try to leave it in this configuration. You put your knife blade under there to the middle of the scroll, rotate your knife up, and then just give it a shake. And then all the noodles will be cut. Okay, and then more flour. And then we just form the pasta into a nice nest, pasta nest. And that can go on a sheet pan. Oh, you can't see. You can freeze it. Just uncover, don't put plastic, right? Just put on parchment or on a sheet pan, put the whole thing in the freezer. And then when they're frozen, you just can pick up the whole thing because it's frozen. And then put them in a zip. And then you have fresh made egg pasta whenever you want it. All right, so we're going to get over there to make the pasta.
So when we freeze it, is there a certain time frame before the pasta is not fresh or we can't use it anymore?
Oh, if it's in the freezer, I'll use it. It gets freezer burn, like if moisture gets in there and like the ice crystals form, I don't know, probably still edible. But there's no substitute for cooking it and eating it now, right? After we just made it. So there is some schools of pasta thought, like this should dry a little bit. But as I've learned, preparing this either at Cal Poly or in high school, it doesn't seem to matter, right? We can cook this right away. Okay, so we're gonna go quick to the cooking part. All right, so this is the setup for the Italian pasta cooking method, okay? Right next door to each other on the stove, we have the water, okay, which we're gonna bring to a boil. There's salt in the water, okay? And then we have our saute pan right here where we're gonna prepare the condiments. Okay, so while the condiments being prepared, if it's dry pasta, which is 12 to 14 minutes, you can go ahead and then, you know, the condiment will, you have 12 minutes to get the condiment and drop the pasta in there. So we're gonna go right from the cooked pasta water, the cooked pasta, right into our condiment. Then we're gonna use pasta water and cook those ingredients together. And that's really the difference between how we make pasta here and how Italians make pasta. And what happens is nice is that it becomes homogeneous, right? That the ingredients all become one, and the flavor really infuses into the noodles. Okay, so whatever flavor you're going to put in your pasta, you can put nothing. You can just have the oil warm, and the noodles can come over. You can throw some butter and some cheese and a little pasta water. It's going to make a beautiful cheese sauce. You'll be good to go. Okay, so something to consider. But whatever flavor you want, there's no in class today. What's that? She doesn't work here anymore.
And just a reminder, Chef Scott is multitasking. He does teach a class. I'm just letting everybody on staff know that you're multitasking. You do have class today as well.
Okay, so I've got a little bit of spicy pork sausage, packaged pork sausage. I'm just going to saute that. And I'm trying to create some layers of flavor here. So I could add vegetable, which I'm going to add some Swiss chard. Oh, sorry. It's Swiss chard, it's red Swiss chard. We're just going to wilt those leaves into the pasta oil, into the sausage oil. Okay, you could add onion, you could add just vegetable, right? Whatever you would like to add. Okay. And remember, when we're cooking in the pan, anything that turns brown, that's flavor. Not black, but turns brown. We want that. We want to capture those ingredients. So I want the sausage to brown. I don't necessarily want it to get all crispy, but I'm going to let it brown in the pan. And then I'm going to use a little pasta water. It's called deglaze. I'm going to add the pasta water to the pan. It's going to sizzle all those brown bits off the bottom.
Chef Scott, quick question. We have a question. What type of oil did you use?
Olive oil.
Olive oil.
Yeah, use olive oil. Sometimes, YouTube or chefs will say, oh, olive oil has a low smoke point, et cetera, et cetera. However, after I got my master's in nutrition, it was kind of a holistic program. and I learned all about vegetable oil. And so I'm not a big fan of vegetable oil anymore. Okay, so here's some red Swiss chard, really delicious. If you want to add dark leafy greens to your diet, I think this is the way to do it. Kale's a little bit of a stretch if you don't eat them, but if you are used to eating vegetables, then you might like the Swiss chard. Now I'm going to just put a little bit of, move a little bit of the pasta water into my sauteing sausage. It's going to slow that from cooking. It's going to sizzle up all those bits. Okay, so get that in there. I'm going to bring up the heat, and then I want to just chop up my greens. And those greens are going to just go in there and wilt on top of that cooking sausage. Okay, so the stems I cut, I just put all the stems in and everything. I just cut those a little small, and then I just roll this up, a sausage, and just cut this into strips. Sorry, I'm running out of time. The strips, cut it across. Okay, so this is ready to go. And then the moisture from the washing of those greens is going to sort of steam the vegetable, okay, in the fat of the sausage, which that's a really nice flavor combination and a really nice way to make a quick dish. I mean, we could stop here. We could serve this over rice. Doesn't have to be sauce, pasta. We can get it right in there. Gonna add a little salt and seasoning before it wilts down. If you let it wilt down, then of course it's going to be harder to get the seasoning in there. I'm gonna add a little bit of garlic. And you can again add any flavors you want here in the condiment step. Okay, whatever you like having your pasta, now's the time to add it. Okay, and then I'm gonna put my pasta I made here into the boiling water. You can give it a stir. It'll separate pretty quick. And the idea with the quantity of water is to think about how much pasta you're going to be serving and make sure we have enough water for that boiling. The water, like you can see, it's come back to a boil already. That's what we want. We want a quick recovery on the pan. So this is simmering down. It's a flip. Okay, and I'm not trying to cook those greens till they're all mushed out. I want them to have a little bit of texture, right? It just cook them. So I'm going to kill the heat on my condiment, and I'm now going to wait for my pasta, which should just be a second. So however long it takes, the only real way to know when pasta's done is to take a bite. I mean, I'm pretty good at looking at it and knowing, but you need to take a bite. Okay, we don't usually throw food against the wall. I know it's like, oh, throw it against the wall. If it sticks, it's ready. That's not a very good technique. So, all right, so we're going to come back on the heat and the condiment. I'm going to add my pasta, and I want to bring some pasta water along with it. Okay, so these are already done. They were just in there for maybe a minute, a little less. They were very thin. So I'm going to put the pasta in with my condiment. I want that water to go with it. That to come together, and we're going to add a little pasta water, and we're going to let those ingredients cook. Okay? And the pasta is going to continue to thicken that liquid, and it's reducing, right? It's evaporating. Okay, and that's where we concentrate the flavor. Okay, so to this, we're going to add a little bit of butter and cheese. And I don't want this to cook too long. You can see how I put all that water in there. It's already evaporating. It's already thickening up. Okay. When we add cheese, we're going to do that with the heat off. We just have a little grated Parmesan and add some cheese. Again, that cheese is going to emulsify with that remaining liquid and make this creamy cheese sauce. See there in the bottom. And then to that, I'm just going to put that of butter. Sorry, I'm rushing so much, that tiny. Okay, now my heat's off, okay? And so this butter, let this butter just melt into there.
And we're using a good portion of butter.
What's that?
We're using a good portion of butter.
That was a little big. But it's gonna be good.
Yeah, I wish it's making me hungry.
All right, so do a quick plate. All right, so no heat, right? We're off the heat. We can add more cheese. We could add more pasta water if it's a little dry, right? We can still add pasta water here. Okay, so it is a little dry, I think. I don't have quite as much sauce as I want, so I'm just gonna put a little pasta water on there. And then between plate up and it going to the table, family or your guests, it's going to thicken up even more still. Okay, so come back over here for the plate up. All right, so I like to have a large enough plate. We don't want to crowd the food. We don't want to overload the container. If you want to give them more food, you can just get them a bigger plate. Okay, but let's not try to crowd it all in there. So some chefs sort of roll the pasta up. I don't really care for that too much. I like my little free form plating. Okay, so the one thing that we're gonna do, I don't have enough time. I was rushing for nothing. Okay, so the one thing we would do before we plate up is we want to taste, right? We want to know that our seasoning is right because we're not going to be able to season here on the plate. Okay, so I'm just going to take a quick taste of that sauce. And remember, we have salt in the pasta water. So as concerned as usual, usually I'm very concerned about salt and proper seasoning. But with that salty pasta water, usually that covers the salt component. Wow.
And let's all pretend we are also tasting.
Yes, please, pretend you're tasting it. So I think that that's really the beauty of this technique, right? It doesn't matter what these ingredients are, right? Whatever we had in the fridge, we can serve it and use that as our condiment, right? And then if we have the pasta in the freezer, right, from the last time we made a big batch last time, then you've got a really beautiful dish, you know, looks like maybe you slaved over it all day, but in fact, the components were already ready to go. So for final seasoning, and we're not tasting it, but we would if we were face-to-face demo, everybody would have your sample, we can taste it. I would say that what we want to do at the end is, of course, check for seasoning, taste for salt, and then we can garnish, okay, with a little bit of cheese. And the only other thing I probably would have put in there, which I forgot, is with the butter, with a fat, when there's fat present, I like a little bit of spritz of acid. So the acid could be a shot of balsamic vinegar in the condiment before the noodles come over, right? And that's kind of a nice flavor in the dish as well, or fresh squeeze of lemon or any kind of citrus into the pasta before we plate. Okay. All right, that's it.
Yum.
Done early. And
Yeah, that looks delicious.
yes, of course, as Tracy says, yeah, we would have to have some wine.
You know,
Sure.
what kind of pairing would you do with this kind of pasta that you just made?
Yeah, so when I think about wine and food pairing, I think about the strength of the wine versus the strength of the food. So I'll give an example. Those you are familiar with wine drinking. So you have all your varietals, you have your white varietals and the red varietals. And you start with very light, like Sauvignon Blanc, Chenin Blanc. Those are very light, sort of what we call picnic wines, where very quaffable, not going to stand up to very strong assertive flavors. Maybe not even some charcuterie might be too, like if it's a spicy pepperoni or something, it might be too much and it'll overpower the flavor of the wine. The idea is to make those flavors of the wine and the food work together. Neither should be too strong or too weak. In all my years, I don't know that I've ever experienced the euphoria that wine and sommeliers talk about. Oh, this is the most perfect match made in heaven. I've never had that experience, and I don't drink a lot of wine, but when I do, it would probably be with something that I'm eating. So I look at the strength, what I call the strength of the wine. So if it's a very light wine, quaffable wine, you're not going to be able to serve it with heavy things. And if it's a very heavy white, like, a big oaky Chardonnay, or, full of malolactic, which we all love, right? It's got that nice sweetness to it. That could overpower something very delicate, right? And so if you think about the dish like swordfish, which I think we're not supposed to eat anymore, but think of like sea bass, right? A nice, firm, ocean-going fish. You could poach sea bass and make a very light citrus butter sauce and serve Shannon. You probably even get away with serving a light red. You could serve Pinot, probably would work in that case. Okay? And if you got a big steak, well, let's stay with the sea bass. If I blacken the sea bass and grill it, probably none of those whites, even the big oaky Chardonnays, might be overpowered by that, the spice and the strong flavors in that blackened fish. So in that case, drop down into the reds, and then we would sort of follow along where it's going to fit. Okay, like something like the biggest, oakiest, most tannic Cabernet Sauvignon, I don't think that's drinkable with anything in my, but, you for sure need some huge chunk of animal flesh that's grilled, right? We need really strong assertive flavors, lots of fat. Those flavors can hopefully stand up to some of the big red wines. But drinking is like it's an evolution, right? We start with soda, like we drink juice, we drink soda, and then the Sutter Home folks thought about White Zinfandel, which really allowed most of us, well, I was maybe too young at the time, but when White Zinfandel hit the market, it was like, oh, this tastes like juice, this tastes like soda, I love this. And that was how we brought a lot of non-wine drinkers into the business. I actually sold liquor and wine for 15 years. I was in the liquor and wine business in Southern California. And then we evolved, right? Then it's like, oh, Chardonnay. We say we want dry, all of you. Oh yeah, something dry, something dry. You don't really mean that. You just say that because you've heard people say it. But I actually, when I was a restaurant manager up at the Biltmore in Santa Barbara years ago, was a husband and wife older. And I said, well, he says, well, we had a huge by the glass list. And he said, well, what do you recommend? I said, well, depends what you like. What are you going to be eating? But it would depend, if you want something a little drier, is that what you prefer? And he says, honey, do you prefer a dry wine or a wet wine? So like most people don't know. Okay, that's just one anecdotal piece of evidence. But in general, in my life, I've encountered people who don't really know. So what we want to do is, like, if you're like, I love Kendall Jackson, I love Meridian, those are not dry wines. Those are full of a second fermentation where we create more residual sugar in the wine. That's why we like it. It's quaffable, it's got this beautiful buttery mouthfeel, and it's sweet. Really what we want is sweet in general. As you become, I think, I don't know if you say more sophisticated, or as you drink wine, you'll start to seek more of the subtleties in the wine. But I think in general, you just can't drink. I think you can drink something stronger, but you can't drink something weaker. So like with this pasta, I'm sure we could go Chardonnay, and we probably there's butter, there's fat from the yolk in the pasta, and there's fat in the sausage. We got butter in there. If this was a cream sauce, then for sure we're going to probably, and depending, right? You could probably get away with some big Chardonnay, or you'd be in some lighter red, Merlot, Shiraz, Pinot Noir, right? Something in that range. And then there's a few rules that work, like, like they always say, oh, Gewürztraminer is good with Chinese food, which I guess that's probably a racist statement, the way things are going these days. But in general, that was the rule, right? And so when you go to, as a salesman, I go to an Asian restaurant, I'd be like, hey, Gewürztraminer goes great with your food. And of course, if you pay attention, every Asian restaurant that serves wine usually has Gewürztraminer on it. Whether it really works or not, I don't know. And then within each varietal category, there's a ton of variation. So it's, I use that sort of continuum of strength of wine, both white and red, to sort of match it to the way the food's prepared. And of course, yeah, blackening, heavier wine, poaching, lighter wine, because it's the way it's been prepared. So I think that's a good way to get started or kind of follow. Or if you don't know, you can always I mean, if there is a wine, if it's a server or it's a sommelier in a restaurant, I always feel like I can get to the category, and then within the category, they can make a recommendation. So I don't look like I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm not going to make the commitment. I'll let them take the responsibility. But if I want a light red, I'll say, hey, light red, and then the
Perfect.
server can make a suggestion.
Thank you for all of those tips. We do have a few questions.
Yes.
I think one goes hand in hand with the other. So the first one was, how long can you keep the pasta once you make it in the fridge? And then how do you serve pasta when you're hosting? If you can't be in the kitchen making everything on the spot and serving immediately, also, are you using kosher salt in the boiling water, and how much?
Kosher salts in the boiling water in that pot, in this pot of water, it was, well, as the Italians would say, una manciata, which is just a handful. So I just took a handful and I threw some in there. I know that's not very exact, but as you practice it, you would be like, oh, I like that the pasta is well seasoned. And that's the other thing, without salt in the water, the pasta in the inside, it's not gonna have any taste, right? You'll taste the sauce, you'll taste the pasta, you'll chew it, and then there'll be that weird place where like there's nothing going on, no taste, there's a void. It's kind of hard to explain. That's a lack of salt always. If you taste something and like there's no finish in your palate, then it's not seasoned properly. And what you should feel, like I feel this tingling sort of on both sides of my jaw when it's seasoned properly. Like when there's those beautiful round flavors and I'm thinking, that I get this weird tingling because I know that it's properly seasoned. So we need to get some salt in there. I've seen, a tablespoon per quart, 2 tablespoons per quart. And then of course, like in a restaurant, they're cooking pasta all night. That water is getting more starchy. They're adding water because it's being evaporated and absorbed by the pasta as they're cooking. So there isn't an exact measurement, but of course we're gonna taste when the final dish comes out. I would not put pasta dough, this fresh pasta egg dough, or the noodles in the fridge. Okay, if you can wrap it in plastic, and then the dough will turn kind of a weird gray color. It happens usually. Once in a while, it doesn't happen. I have no idea why, but it does turn a gray color. And it's not very appetizing. So make it and freeze it, or just make it and eat it. Okay, or if you don't want that, then buy dry pasta. And there's nothing wrong with dry pasta. You can use that same method I just showed you with dry pasta. You just have to, you have more time to prepare the condiment and wait for that, the pasta to come and meet the condiment. Okay.
Perfect. So if you wanted to, let's say you're hosting, do you recommend just buying the dry pasta or making the pasta in the morning and then by dinner time?
I would say if I'm a host or hostess that likes to be with my guests, and I like to be in the kitchen, and they usually come to me, which I like, and people tend to congregate in the kitchen. But if you're gonna say have a cocktail hour and you're gonna sit with your guests, that's your plan, then I wouldn't make fresh egg pasta. Right? From a catering standpoint, I would select a menu that was more conducive to pre-cooking. So I wanted Italian, I might make lasagna, which is perfectly acceptable. You can make fresh egg pasta and make lasagna, but you would make it ahead. And in Italy, in fact, it's served at room temperature. It's never served piping hot like it is here. So you could create dishes that you could prepare ahead, show your skill, and then be able to relax. So it's always a function of what kind of expectation I have as the host of me interacting with the guests. So that's always the biggest consideration. This is an activity. And in my opinion, it's entertainment. So people come and will watch, they can get, right out of the pan, you can bowl it up right there in the kitchen and they can just stand there and talk about it and eat it. And to me, that's a great party, right? You've given them something to entertain them, some activity, and then they're tasting it. They can talk to the person that's making it. So I don't do as much catering as I used to when I was younger, but I'd always try to sell those catering stations because I think that activity at the party is for sure part of the entertainment, right? Instead of the guests, especially if it's not family, like some people that don't know each other that well, having sort of, I always think of myself, if I'm doing pasta bar, or sometimes I do omelet bar, or I do live cooking for the catering party, I feel like I'm like the not matchmaker, but I'm the link between people who don't know each other, right? So they're talking to me, then another person comes up, and now these two people start talking to each other who maybe don't know each other. So that's always a good way to entertain. Unless you're doing something very formal, then again, I'd have to have somebody in the kitchen to make this to order and then have people to deliver it. So again, it depends on what your thing is. And I know we're running out of time. Just maybe one more tip for catering. When you have a party, do not put the drinks in the front room. And for sure, don't put the drinks in the kitchen, okay? The drink table or the bar where the alcohol is, it needs to be at the farthest point of the space. Okay, so if you're gonna feed them outside, that drink station should be at the other end of the yard by the fence. And what that does is as people arrive, they're all gonna look for something to drink. And you're like, oh, it's out back. And it pulls all the people through the space. If you set up the beverage station anywhere in the middle, that's where people will get a drink. And then they're not, oh, I'll go look around. They're like, oh, I'm gonna stand here. And then when their friend arrives, oh, let me get your drink. And now we're all standing, clogging that traffic area. Because you really wanna think that through. That's the best way to pull, even if it's just a cooler of soda, it's like, put it way out, make them go out there and get it. And that keeps everybody moving through the space. Okay.
Perfect, Chef Scott. Thank you. I'm just sharing your website to your restaurant, Skimmer's Panini. It's in the chat. And we just want to say thank you so much for hosting 2 days of cooking demos. Will we be getting a recipe for either the biscuits and gravy or the pasta? When you get a chance, if you want to just take a picture, I know if it's written down like in a paper, just take a picture and we can definitely share that in our staff council website.
I think I sent, well, I thought I emailed you, but I am not very technical.
Oh, I'll follow up with you. Don't worry.
I will, yeah. So I definitely will share that. That's no problem.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
I'm around, so if you have any cooking questions, I'm gonna be back on, we're all gonna be back on campus, looks like in the fall, so.
Yeah, for sure. So hopefully maybe next year when we host Staff Appreciation Week, we'll be there in person and be able to taste all the delicious.
And taste. Yeah,
treats
because
that you
this could
have.
not taste good. You don't know. All I
It
have
looks
to do is be like,
delicious.
and then you're like, oh, it must taste good. Well, who knows? Like on TV, they're like, oh, this is great. It's like, is it?
Yeah, really, is it? But we'll be
Yes,
there.
I want to be tested. I want you to taste it, so.
Perfect.